less than a month before the Iowa caucuses. Of course, that has the liberal media jumping for joy, hoping that he's dropping out. Well, tonight, Vivek is here to respond. Plus, what's going on with our country, especially with young people? A new poll reveals disturbing new trends. Young Americans supporting Osama bin Laden. We have the details. And alligator versus python. We now finally have the answer on who would win the epic battle caught on tape. But first, new year, new liberal laws. Every year, liberal state autocrats, they squeeze the necks and twist the brains of their hardworking citizens just a little bit more. Why? Because to Democrats, there's never been a problem that their god of government couldn't solve by dumping more money and more legislation on top of it. All at the price of your inalienable rights. And of course, the future for your kids and grandkids. Fair trade, right? Well, here's just a small sample. Now, trust me, we could go on and on with the left-wing lunacy of 2023. The not-so-golden state tops our list. In the new year, big California retailers will be required to have a clearly labeled gender-neutral toy section. That's definitely what the kids have been clamoring for. California's Ebony Alert system, which is just for missing black kids, goes into effect. Doesn't sound racist at all. Also, their gas-powered equipment ban goes into effect. That includes certain chainsaws, hedge trimmers, edgers, lawnmowers, and leaf blowers. So pretty much everything you use. See you later. And a new report says Pizza Hut franchises are already firing their delivery drivers before the state's new $20 fast food minimum wage kicks in. Seems like a nice start in the new year for California's low-income workers. The North Star state coming in at a close second place. Minnesota now requiring menstrual products, which include pads and tampons, be available in girls' and boys' bathrooms for students grades 4th grade to senior year. This from a state where illegal immigrants, including those who've recently crossed the border, have already started applying for driver's licenses for everybody. It's a state where felons can vote in 2024, and Minnesota is already a sanctuary state for child sex changes. That, come to think of it, that should just become their new tourism ad. Oregon, feeling left out, introduced nearly 3,000 pieces of legislation last year, and its governor signed over 600 of them. One of them lets mostly anyone turn their apartment into a child care facility. So pretty much any apartment could be overrun with children during the day, including your next door neighbor, all in the name of equity, of course. And finally, the blue state of New York. Governor Hochul just signed legislation creating a committee to consider reparations for slavery. Yes, it's coming. Following the lead of California, of course. Joining us now is Monica Crowley. She's former Trump Treasury Assistant Secretary and host of the Monica Crowley podcast. Merry Christmas, Monica. Thanks for being here. Gender-neutral children's toys, tampons in boys' bathrooms. Are voters asking for any of these things?
Well, Merry Christmas to you, Pete. It's great to be here. Thank you. No, voters are not clamoring for these things. But, you know, in our system of federalism, states have a lot of latitude, and red states really work hard to make sure that their residents have expanded freedom. Whereas in blue states, those legislatures and those governors work for anti-freedom legislation like you just laid out. I mean, that blue state list is an absolute clown show of anti-freedom laws and mandates. And yet, you know, people aren't asking for this, but anytime you have a blue state, anytime you have these kinds of Democrat leaders, they will use any excuse whatsoever to clamp down on your daily life and your freedoms. And this is why, Pete, you are seeing tremendous outmigration, population loss from these blue states like California, New York, Illinois, because people have just had it. They've had it with this kind of encroachment on their personal freedoms, of course, but they've also had it with the fact that in these blue states, as a result of skyrocketing cost of living, astronomical taxes, suffocating regulations, all of this combined, you've got like on top of just a crisis of living in these states and these communities with out of control crime and a collapse of law and order, you also have a collapse of social cohesion in these states. And all of this leads to economic anxiety, it leads to personal anxiety. And that's why you have masses of people, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, leaving these states, going to more free red states like Texas and Florida and Tennessee.
Monica, you're exactly right about that. Newsweek noted that recently as well. But what's with the focus on the hypersexualization of kids? I mean, tampons for boys in boys' bathrooms in 4th grade, sanctuary states for sex changes for minors. These are not kids who are voting. They're future voters, but they're hyper-focused on our youngest. Why is that?
Yeah, and that's really waking a lot of people up across the country, including in blue states, Pete, because, you know, it's one thing for these kinds of Marxists to engage in this kind of cultural Marxism when they're targeting the overall culture or adults. But when they come after children, that wakes up a lot of parents and others who are really concerned about the future of the country and these kids. It is cultural Marxism. It is a way of confusing children and breaking up the nuclear family, or at the very least weakening the nuclear family, and that is the ultimate goal. Look, these leftists, Pete, really want a standing army, generation after generation of standing army of these little indoctrinated Marxists going forward. And what better way to get to them early than to confuse them on the most basic aspect of their own humanity, which is their gender. And then once they're confused, they drive a wedge between them and their parents, them and their faith, them and their community, and guess who is ready there with open arms to step in and embrace them? It is the left, whether it's the left in government, the left in school, or the left in the culture. And those forces end up replacing the family. And we've seen this throughout history in every kind of communist regime. So this is cultural Marxism, Pete, and it needs to be fought at every turn.
And it never ends well. Amen and amen. So well said. Monica, thank you for your time. All right. While Democrats spent 2023 creating new worthless but dangerous laws that we just outlined, they didn't enforce the common sense laws that are already on the books. We've all seen the rampant unpoliced looting over this past year. Well, over the weekend, the Irvine Police Department releasing this video of 3 male suspects just brazenly looting about $16,000 worth of merchandise from a sunglass hut. And they didn't even bother to cover their faces. Why should they? No consequences. The crime spree this month has been particularly shocking just before the Christmas holiday. Thieves in Washington, D.C. stole $250,000 worth of merchandise from a Chanel store during a smash and grab, in which one of the thieves discharged a fire extinguisher. Why not? And in Memphis, looters rammed a white Nissan through the entrance of a Boost Mobile store. And this after the suspects committed another smash and grab, the same morning, at an AT&T location. They just couldn't decide which self-rider to hit. Major U.S. chains were crushed under the onslaught. Rite Aid filing to close 154 stores. CVS is closing 300 stores annually until 2026. And Foot Locker, the guys with the refs uniforms, they'll close as many as 420 stores. Joining me now is Chris Bedford. He's the executive editor of the Common Sense Society. Chris, what's worse? Crazy new laws coming up in the new year, you probably heard us talk about that, or is it the fact that the laws on the books aren't enforced and therefore you get mayhem?
Oh, I think it's definitely the latter. I mean, the former are troublesome. The former are just decadent, the kind of things that left-wing politicians pursue to please parts of their base. But the latter is destroying lives. They're destroying cities. I lived in Washington, D.C. for 18 years, and I had to leave the house that I owned with my family because it was becoming so incredibly unsafe. A neighborhood that had once been home to vibrant communities with young children out there walking their dogs and going to local restaurants and bars and using local stores. A lot of those people ended up having to flee the city because of crime. And this was all done supposedly in the name of equity. They were no longer going to enforce laws against violent crime. They were treating 17-year-olds like 9-year-olds. But it doesn't actually achieve any of that because, well, my neighborhood was hit pretty hard and the crime went bad. The poorer neighborhoods, places that they were trying to help, were absolutely being decimated. There are people who are losing their actual children, 7- and 8-year-olds, to random stray bullets. There are parents who are celebrating this Christmas or trying to celebrate this Christmas, talking about the violent carjacking that their family sustained, or the son or the daughter who was not at the table that year. And the whole point is to let these criminals run loose to try and save their lives, but it's actually destroying the lives of citizens. And this is not something that's happening because of some outside economic force. This is suicide by these city councils.
It really is. You're exactly right. It's intentional. They know what the outcome is going to look like, and they're counting on voters not holding them accountable because of the nature of these cities. Chris, thank you so much.
How dare this mayor and city council have the guts to give migrants $51 million?
They should not be housed in impoverished and marginalized black and brown communities where we have food shortages and homelessness.
We have not gotten anything for our community.
Those were outraged Chicago residents earlier this month, demanding their city leaders, who were supposed to represent them, prioritize their citizens over illegal immigrants. Scenes like this one raise a question. Do we, all of us, focus too much on national politics? You know, parents rallied against school boards and made some progress in taking back corners of our education system from the left, at least in their local communities. So is it time to also take on city councils? Because clearly they're not listening to the will of law-abiding people. Let's go back to Chicago. Their city council voted against a measure that would have asked voters next year on the ballot if they believe the city should maintain its statutory status as a sanctuary city. Can't let the voters decide what they would want. Boston's city council approved a measure that would let non-citizen immigrants vote in Boston elections. They claim it's only for those with legal status, but considering how often Democrats don't enforce immigration laws, of course you're going to get illegals voting. They say the people crossing our border right now have legal status because of so-called amnesty claims. And it's not just issues of immigration. In Pleasanton, California, sounds like a nice town, their council is supporting a ban on gas-powered leaf blowers. Big problem. And in New York City, the council is approving pro-crime acts like banning solitary confinement in city jails. Got to loosen those consequences. While punishing law-abiding citizens whose vehicles don't meet their new arbitrary noise standards. If your ride makes a sound over 85 decibels, whatever level that is, cameras will capture your license plate and send you a ticket. Joining me now is Lee Zeldin. He's the former New York congressman and gubernatorial candidate. Lee, do you agree that if people want to make an impact on their communities, yes, the national stuff's important, but the local route is the way to go?
Yeah, 100%. And at these local levels, you're watching the petri dish of far-left lunacy. What might be happening inside of a city council would be coming to a state capital near you soon. New York City, for example, they passed a ban on the hookup with for gas into new construction. So the state capitol then passes a ban statewide on hooking up new construction to gas. What you see leading our nation down in Washington are politicians who come from these cities. You know, Nancy Pelosi comes from San Francisco. In New York, Chuck Schumer's from New York City. AOC's from New York City. Hakeem Jeffries is from New York City. And these local races, the turnout is abysmal. And actually, when you show up, you find out that a lot of these longtime Democratic voters are disenfranchised Democratic voters who feel like Democratic policies have been harming them. So they're actually looking for these conservative solutions. They are willing to vote differently, but you have to show up and earn their support. And the last thing I'll tell you is that a lot of these Democratic voters registered Democrat because they want their vote to matter. They feel like the only way for their vote to make a difference is in a Democratic primary to vote for the most normal person on the ballot. A lot of these registered Democrats are actually conservative Democrats or really Republicans who registered Democrats. So the votes are there, but we're just not talking to them on the right.
Well, let's stick with New York City because the mayor, Eric Adams, he disagrees with you. He says he's doing a great job. Watch.
2 years ago, the city was in a free fall. We got stuff done in 2022, 2023. What we are really happy about is how we're continuing to invest in people, public safety, and public spaces, reshaping our streets, making it easier for New Yorkers to use.
He's happy about the condition of New York City, Lee. Are there enough of these, more conservative Democrats registered to eventually throw out bums like this that aren't fixing cities?
What's wild about your question is that Adams' biggest threat is to his left. It's not even to his right. There are a lot of people in New York City who feel like he isn't far left enough, which is wild. And no, this is not the right direction in the city because it's the same Eric Adams who will also admit when he's blaming somebody else, like those big bad MAGA Republicans who have caused the migrant crisis, they say, while he's calling on President Biden to do something about our border, he won't actually put the blame on the feet of the president who isn't in a position to do something. So what he'll say is it will destroy New York City. Every once in a while, you get this nugget of honesty that might come out of these blue city mayors and these blue state governors. In the case of Eric Adams, what's wild is that the biggest vulnerability that he faces electorally right now is actually on his left. They think that he isn't socialist and far left wacky enough.
Yeah, you do see that in big cities. Minneapolis, same thing. Anybody that shows a semblance of sanity gets primaried, and then the city council gets even crazier, and the cities get what they deserve. Lee, thank you very much. All right, liberal backflips today over the idea of Vivek Ramaswamy dropping out. This after a poll ballot today. Here to break it all down is former Trump attorney and former federal prosecutor, Jim Trusty. Jim, concerning Jack Smith, we know it's political persecution, but he doesn't want Donald Trump or his lawyers to say that in court. Is that what's at issue here?
Yeah, it's pretty rich. I mean, Jack Smith is announcing he's the guardian against politicizing the criminal justice system. And he threw out probably 7 or 8 different areas that he wants to prevent, through the trial judge, even being mentioned in front of the jury. And I'll say for some of it, it's kind of borderline absurd. Like the idea that you can't challenge the bias of witnesses testifying against you would be a real change in bedrock law. And he has this idea that the president shouldn't even be allowed to bring out that he tried to get the National Guard out there to the Capitol on January 6th, which is obviously a relevant piece of mitigation, a relevant fact for this trial. He gives this ridiculous statement that it's like the bank robber trying to blame the security guard for the robbery, which is probably the faultiest analogy in all of the pleadings we've seen from special counsel. The reality is, it's more like somebody calls the bank and says, hey, you might get robbed. We can give you more security. And bank manager Pelosi and assistant manager Bowser say, no, thanks, no need, we're fine. So everything about this motion is premature, a little bit absurd, but it might land with a sympathetic audience with a D.C. judge and a D.C. jury.
That's the point. D.C. judge, D.C. jury, why not throw everything at the wall if they can? And they're certainly trying at this point. By the way, Jim, here was the reaction today concerning the Michigan decision. Should Trump, the leading candidate, actually be on the ballot? Watch this.
At a later stage, the people who are challenging Trump in Michigan will very likely go back to the courts and try again.
There may need to be a revisitation of this if, in fact, he wins the nomination for the Republican Party in the general election.
There is still the possibility that there could be challenges that could be successful down the road in Michigan. But
Jim, they're not giving up hope. They're hoping that somehow this will go the other way and Trump won't be on the ballot in Michigan and elsewhere in their dreams.
Yeah, I mean, look, and every state has different laws, different electoral procedures, and the Michigan court did leave open the possibility of revisiting. But this is the problem with lawfare. You know, what we're looking at is a group of Democrats around the country, sometimes ex-DOJ officials, that this is all they do, is pursue opportunities to sue the president, to find ways to criminalize non-criminal conduct, or to find ways to keep them off a ballot. It is manipulating the criminal and civil justice system beyond recognition. It's crossing the Rubicon, but they do it happily. They think that the ends justify the means, and they'll keep filing cases. So we're reduced, frankly, to hoping that Justice Roberts gets over his natural reluctance to wading into these issues and at least puts an end to all of this lawfare by way of ballot elimination.
It is lawfare, and we have jumped the Rubicon. We are jumped the shark in uncharted waters. But there are other places, Jim, where this stuff like this happens. Take Bolivia, for example. Bolivia's tyrannical regime has held a leading opposition figure prisoner for a year now. What was his crime? Having led the nationwide nonviolent demonstration that ended in the resignation of the movement towards socialism authoritarian leader Evo Morales in 2019. So the angle mentioned yesterday, Russia disqualifying Putin opponents from running, Bolivia doing the same. Isn't this what tyrannical regimes do? And how far could this go?
Yeah, that's the problem. And that's why we talk about the Rubicon. You know, there's a whole bunch of the people in this country that are so obsessed with President Trump, that so dislike him, that they don't mind changing all of the rules of criminal and civil process. And we're going to be left with a system. It may not quite catch up to Bolivia or Russia in the next few days or months or weeks, but the bottom line is a bad one. I mean, we should recognize rule of law. We should recognize the strength of a constitutional republic that doesn't have to have lawsuits determine elections or election eligibility. And I think a lot of this country is going to realize way too late they have fundamentally transformed justice in a bad way.
Realizing way too late is a very dangerous proposition for my kids and yours, for the future of our country, and they're setting those dangerous precedents right now in real time. In 2024, will define the stakes of what our justice system looks like. Jim, thank you very much for breaking it down. All right, now it's time for our political palate cleanser. Watch. Now we know, in a matchup between an alligator and a massive Burmese python, who won? The alligator won. You can see it enjoying its spoils right here. I guess it's got to be like spaghetti or ramen for them, easy. Of course, where did this happen? The wonderful state of Florida.
Ramaswamy, who seems to be fading.
We know in businesses and in politics, when things get tight, say goodbye to the advertising.
He will tell you that it just hasn't been effective, so he's taking everything off the airwaves, but it's probably something more to it.
Vivek Ramaswamy has lost all momentum.
The best thing about January is it may be the last month we actually have to deal with Vivek Ramaswamy.
The left-wing media hyperventilating, frothing at the mouth at the idea of Vivek's demise. The man igniting all this wild speculation joins us now from the campaign trail in Iowa, Vivek Ramaswamy. So let's get this cleared up right out the gate, Vivek. Yep. Does the liberal media have a reason to be this excited?
No, they don't. Sorry to disappoint him. Actually, I'm not sorry to disappoint him. I'm actually thrilled to disappoint them. We're going this to the very end. I expect we're going to be successful. But, Pete, the thing about me is unlike other candidates, I've been a businessman. I've run businesses before. I understand when something actually makes sense and when it doesn't. So when advertising rates are spiking for everybody else, you've got $200 million, close to that, been spent by the campaigns and their super PACs on TV ads. That's not the place to spend it. Instead, we're going grassroots, bottom up. I've done the full Grassley. I've done more stops in Iowa than probably many of the other candidates combined. And we're doubling and tripling down on our spending in a much more targeted way that's going to deliver, you mark my words on this, a surprise at the Iowa caucus on January 15th. I think we're going to shock the world, actually. And so I'm running this campaign in the same way that I would run a company, with an actual IQ and an actual brain, not taken for a ride by political consultants. And I think that's going to lead us to ultimately success here.
Vivek, can you hang a number on what shock the world means? I mean, I've heard you say that before. Iowa's going to be a big surprise in your mind. What does that mean?
I love where we're sitting right now, Pete, where the mainstream media has got our expectations low, hanging me in 4th place. I think if you take where the mainstream media's polling narrative is, of having me just in the high single digits in Iowa, we're going to shatter that. And I'm going to leave the rest to January 15th. I think we have a good shot at winning the Iowa caucus. And if you look at the poll numbers right now, I know that would tell a different story. But it's because many of our supporters in this campaign, they're not polled. These are younger people, people who have not traditionally participated in the caucus, but who are inspired by a leader from the different generation, from the next generation, with an actual vision of what it means to be an American, not just criticizing Biden. That's old. That's tired. That's yesterday. But to stand for actually our own alternative vision. That's something that's bringing new people into this movement. A good clue on that, Pete, is this, is 40% of our donors are first-time ever donors to the GOP. That number is 2% for other Republican candidates. So that gives you a sense for how different this campaign is. That's what we're going to need to win the general election in a landslide, which I'm confident I'll deliver. And that's going to start with a major surprise in Iowa on January 15th. And I think being a businessman coming in from the outside to this world of politics has helped me call the bluff on a little bit of what these standard political consultants do. It's like an assembly line. They just put candidates on. I'm not going to be on somebody else's assembly line. We're making independent decisions. And I think we're going to get the dues paying off for that on January 15th.
But the big one looming in the background, which everyone knows, is the overwhelming frontrunner of Donald Trump, who remains polling ahead in Iowa. And Vivek, earlier today, we saw Michigan reject an attempt to remove Trump from the ballot there. Now, you've made some waves recently when you announced plans to remove yourself from Colorado's ballot following that ruling. Welcome back. Well, the CIA in hot water as we head into 2024. A sweeping lawsuit demanding detailed information on a shadowy group inside Langley, CIA headquarters, known as the COVID-19 Discovery Team. Now, this comes after a whistleblower allegation alleging that the CIA provided financial rewards to 6 CIA agents on that team to change their position and come out against the possibility of the virus originating in a lab in Wuhan, China. Leading the charge against the CIA is Mike Howell, Heritage Foundation Oversight Project Director. Mike, what can you tell us? I mean, what kind of proof is there, and what does it mean?
So in September, a highly credible CIA whistleblower came to the House of Representatives and said that COVID Origins team, of the 7 officials on it, 6 thought it was a lab leak. 1 thought it maybe could have been some zoonotic or animal-to-animal transfer. Now, the CIA famously came out with their determination that said they didn't have any certainty one way or the other, thereby overruling the consensus of their own experts. And the whistleblower further alleges that there was financial rewards given to those 6 in order to change their tune. And so it's a massive cover-up, one that I think is one of the biggest stories about intelligence community politicization in recent memory. And we're suing the CIA. The CIA has stiff-armed Congress and refusing to turn over these records. So now they're taking it up with us. We got them in federal court. We're going to force the disclosure of this information. There is no reason why this information does not belong to the American people. And so we're in court taking up that fight, and we intend to win and make sure there's some accountability, because this is one of the biggest lies that has ever been told.
Good for you. It's a huge story. If our top intelligence agency is paying agents to have a different outcome because it benefits someone else, we need to know about it. I'm also, Mike, curious, what does Fauci know about all of this? It was reported in September that he secretly went to CIA headquarters to influence the agency's probe on COVID origins, according to House Republicans. So that could tell us how far-reaching this lawsuit could possibly be.
Absolutely. So in that reporting, Fauci went over to CIA headquarters and wasn't logged into the usual visitor, systems. They were clearly trying to hide what he was doing there. To me, it absolutely reeks of Fauci weighing in to politicize this process. Because keep in mind what was happening at that period of time. You had everybody in the elites and media and, in the deep state trying to give China the benefit of the doubt, even though they had clearly lied. There was massive geopolitical implications of pointing to the lab leak theory. It's why they called people like me and you and others conspiracy theorists. Now everyone generally accepts it definitely was a lab leak. But Fauci was making sure that he was playing politics at this point in time. It was about the election going into 2020 and giving China, the benefit of the doubt they do not deserve. We need massive accountability for the chaos that China released on the world with this dirty, dirty virus.
Absolutely right. The CIA denies what the rest of us figured out in 10 minutes, that when a COVID virus originates from a town where there's a top-level COVID lab, you might want to look there first. Mike, thank you for staying on this. We deserve accountability. Appreciate your time. All right, coming up, why are young Americans loving Osama? And what we find out when we find out what happens when robots attack? Jason Chaffetz and Sean Duffy join me for the Wednesday Roundup coming up next.
It's time is Winter Storm HQ.
It's time for a Wednesday Roundup. And for that, we turn to Fox News contributors and our friends Jason Chaffetz and Sean Duffy. All right, guys, the Daily Mail released the results of their poll researching the popularity of Osama bin Laden among Americans. And the results were, shall we say, alarming. Specifically when it comes to one demographic, young Americans. When asked about their views of bin Laden, 20% of 18 to 29-year-olds said they had a positive view of him. And when asked about the views of the 9/11 mastermind, 3 out of 10 young Americans were sympathetic to his opinions. So, Jason, let's start with you. Shouldn't it just be like 100% against?
Yeah, I want these punks to go meet with the families, go meet with the brothers, the sisters, the daughters, the sons that were affected by the 3,000 people. Have them go talk to people like Pete Hegseth, who gave up years of their life to go fight for this country and make sure we're safe in the future. And I tell you, they haven't had those experiences yet, and it's a shame. We're failing our youth if they don't understand this as a fundamental, simple truth, that he is one of the most evil people to ever walk on the planet.
Sean, terrorists polling at 30%?
Yeah, no doubt. So it's not shocking, though, right? So you talk about this a lot. We send our kids to little commie camps called, schools in America, and they're taught to hate America, to blame America, but not love America. And so Osama bin Laden and what he thought of America is right in line with what these kids have been taught for the last, 12, 14 years of their schooling. So, of course, they're going to hate us. And that viewpoint is not going to change until you change the school system in America and get the communism out and bring an American-loving thought again.
It's a great point. I mean, bin Laden was very good at articulating anti-American rhetoric, and so if that's what you're being taught, sounds real good. All right, now let's turn over to the NFL. All right, Clay Travis and Skip Bayless are catching some heat for suggesting that Taylor Swift has become a distraction for Kelce and the Chiefs. Clay Travis posting on Twitter, "The Chiefs are not a good football team, and Travis Kelce looks like he should retire. He's been worthless the last 7 or 8 weeks. The double worthless Pfizer shots may have caught up with him. Either that or Taylor Swift is the Chiefs' Yoko Ono. Maybe both." Now, Skip Bayless chimed in as well, tweeting, "It feels like it's about time to call Taylor Swift a distraction." What do you think, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reeves? And how about you, Travis Kelce? Sean, what do you think? Is Taylor a distraction? I know Rachel's got a view on this. What's your view? Distraction, or are the Chiefs just getting worse?
Listen, of course, yes. So the Chiefs are getting worse, but also when you're more focused on Taylor Swift and what she's saying and doing in the stands instead of playing football, it's a distraction. Forget about Taylor Swift. Focus on your game, right? And I think we've had real issues there. So again, I think we'd be well served if the Chiefs sent Taylor Swift packing, send her home, don't send her to the games. Let's play football.
I don't know, Jason. You've played college football. A lot of people don't know that. I mean, is she the Yoko Ono? Have you ever encountered this effect?
Yeah, the Yoko Swifto, as they're calling her. I don't know. When you're in the NFL and your team is losing and you go to another country to go watch her in concert and you lose the game, then people have got a case to be made. If you win, don't have a problem. But if you're losing, don't get on a plane and fly to Brazil to go see your girlfriend.
Winning fixes everything. You're right. But when you lose, People ask questions. All right, you invoke the name of Brazil, which moves us to our next story in South America. A Brazilian model was arrested in her home country for walking her dogs topless. Caroline Werner is a businesswoman who also has her own bikini line. She apparently forgot it. Said she's traveled all over the world and has not ever had any issues being topless, but was appalled that she was detained, saying in many countries it's a completely normal practice and that a woman's body is not objectified or hypersexualized. Werner could face anywhere from 3 months to a year if found guilty. Jason, you've been known to walk around topless at times. Should women not have the same right?
You know, Pete, nothing good can come from the answer that I'm about to give. I will say this, though. You're going to have to investigate the facts, and I am so glad. I talked off air with Sean Duffy. He has agreed to go talk to the perpetrators, talk to the victims of this crime, and get to the bottom, and I will not come to a conclusion until he's finished his investigation.
Well, she's innocent until proven guilty, right, Pete? But listen, there's a time and a place for everything. And, you know, the topless in your bathroom, that works. Maybe topless on the beach, that works too. But, you know, walking on the street topless, I'm sorry, there's kids, there's potentially families, and there's a certain decorum by which we live. I don't mean to be a prude, but you know what? If you're walking with your family, with your boys might like it, but as the dad, you're like, listen, you know, we went out for ice cream and, you know, you got a little more than ice cream walking on the street.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Innocent until proven guilty. All right, real quick, one sentence. I need New Year's resolutions. Jason first, then Sean. Go.
Be a nicer person.